Binge the full week of The Ray Taylor Show ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus.
This is The Ray Taylor Show.
Welcome to The Ray Taylor Show, where I bring you reviews of the latest movies and TV shows, as well as classic and foreign films. I'm your host, Ray Taylor, and on this podcast, I'll be talking about all things film and television. Whether you're looking for a new show to binge or want to know if that blockbuster is worth the trip to the theater, or just want to hear my thoughts on a classic or foreign film, I've got you covered. So join me every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for new episodes, and let's dive into the world of film and television together. On today's episode, I am revisiting the horror film from 2018, Hereditary. Written and directed by Ari Aster, starring Toni Collette, Millie Shapiro, Alex Wolff, and Gabriel Byrne. This movie, a grieving family is haunted by tragic and disturbing occurrences. I'm going to be reviewing the next 3 weeks, this week, next week, and the week after, the three Ari Aster films, which the newest one, something if Beau is Afraid, I think, I have not seen. Have been looking forward to, and wanting to revisit Hereditary. Next week will be Midsommar, as it is Halloween, as it is the month of horror movies at the Ray Taylor Show, where I love to, review classic horror films, review horror films by specific directors. So this being Ari Aster, although I don't think Beau is Afraid is technically a horror film, but it doesn't matter. I'm looking forward to it regardless, and was also looking forward to rewatching this movie, which is my second time watching this film. The first time I watched it, I liked it, but didn't really hit with me, didn't really hook me, didn't really like the end. And I think it was mostly because I was, confused. I think I watched it in a theater, and there are aspects of this movie that require you to read text on screen. Sometimes on-screen text, sometimes text in a book, a portion of a book that is literally highlighted for you to read, in order to kind of explain the aspects of this movie that happen at the end. And I think I didn't read those. But even still, in this rewatch, having the ability to pause and actually take time to read it and make sure I understood it, it's still the end. I had to look up and kind of get a little bit more backstory, specifically on the end, that kind of really fleshed out and filled in all of the blank spots, the blind spots of this movie. But, it was a bit confusing potentially the first time watching it. But this time, obviously, reviewing it, I'm able to pay more attention, take notes, all of those things. I can pause the movie to read things. I can also look things up. So this watch made a lot more sense, really made me appreciate this movie quite a bit more. And I appreciated all the aspects of this movie in a much deeper way, I would say, in this watch. It is definitely a masterwork, as I reminds me a lot of another director that I watched a while back, and I'm completely blanking on his name. But these directors that are doing horror in a new way, the guy that did The Vivitch, right? I'm going to look this up live on the thing here, right? Because that's what you do when you're recording a show. You look up things live on the show. Robert Eggers. Kind of reminds me of Robert Eggers. Although I think I appreciate Robert's stuff a little bit more than Ari Aster, but we'll see. I do love this movie, though. It's great. Amazing performances from Toni Collette, who plays the mom, as well as Alex Wolff, who plays the son. I think in watching this movie the second time, Alex Wolff's character, Peter, I believe, was, a devastating character. Just putting myself in his shoes was just it's like he's going through hell in this movie for sure. But a movie that is an instant classic in the horror genre, I would say. So fits in perfectly in the month of October as I'm watching all of these horror movies. But in rewatching this movie, it hit so much different today than when it did when I first watched it. Brought up so many crazy parallels to my life, at least in the way this movie starts. Not necessarily the movie as a whole, but definitely the way this movie starts specifically hit with me recently. Also, the scary moments, like jump scares, followed many times. There are like these jump scares that happen in this movie, and they're immediately followed up by just something extra creepy, or something like ambiguously happening. This visual that is almost like a 1-2 punch every time. Like something crazy happens, and then it's followed right up with something else. You also have in this movie this strobing bass score that sounds almost like a sonogram, but also has like this kind of ticking time clock type of anxiety feeling to it. Also relates to what the characters in this movie describe feeling at moments, as if the air feels like it's pulsing. So it's a sound of in the score that really does a lot of things in this movie and relates to this movie in a lot of ways. I appreciate it. There's also some tilt shift shots that make the real life shots look miniature, which ties in with the fact that the main character, Toni Collette's character, is an artist who is making these models. So that aspect of it reminded me of a short horror film that I watched recently called Night of the Mini Dead, part of the Love, Death, and Robots series, season 3, episode 4, Night of the Living Dead. More of a comedy than anything, but is done in tilt shift, so it all looks like miniatures of this zombie apocalypse. Amazing little short film, part of the Love, Death, and Robots series. But that kind of it reminded me of this movie. This movie reminded me of that. There's also some meta comments that gave me Synecdoche, New York vibes, involving the miniatures and Annie, the Toni Collette's character is making, as these miniatures are kind of her representation of events that have happened in her life. And then also this movie, the blending of kind of a haunting or possession along with mental health issues like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, things like that, which I think is kind of a common thing in horror movies, where the line between what you're watching is real and what you're watching is in somebody's head is blurred, and this movie does that a lot. A lot of amazing practical effects in this movie, which I love movies that do that, and also use of light refraction along with just dark corners of a room being utilized to hide things in the background that you're supposed to notice, or at least take time to notice. And the way they're done, I appreciated, because you could actually see them, versus some movies that hide things in the dark, maybe do too good of a job hiding them to where you really can't see them that well. Also, the family dynamic in this movie is great. The mom is an artist and comes from a family with very severe mental health issues that contributes to her traumatic past. And her art recreating moments in miniature is great. It also shows how she interprets moments differently than how they may have actually occurred, which is something that I noticed, which I don't know if is intentional or if it's it's just another aspect of this movie where you're questioning what's real, what are you watching that's real, what do these characters view, what are their perspectives on what's going on, what is real, what memories are real, how are they interpreting the memories that they have, is they changing them, which happens. I mean, human memory is pretty horrible, so it's a pretty common thing. You also have the father trying to hold everything together. He is like Gabriel Byrne is like he's in many ways kind of a nothing character, but he is the one person that is kind of the grounded person in this, where crazy things are happening to everybody else involved, and he is kind of at the center of it, just trying to stay calm and stay grounded, which I feel definitely have sympathy for that guy, but doesn't have a whole lot to do. And then of course you have the kids. You have Peter specifically. One of the kids has a very tragic end, but Peter goes through hell in this movie from every direction. It is like, to see the hell that this kid is going through is pretty horrific. If this movie had just stuck with his story and not showing the kind of the craziness that's happening to the other people in this movie as well. But yeah, it's a great movie where you don't know what's happening. I do appreciate the end after having rewatched it, after having done just a little research on the end of this movie and the kind of historical fictional figures that it represents. Definitely helped fill in some of the blanks and made me appreciate it more. But I do want to get into spoilers for Hereditary, so dive into specific moments. So if you don't want to be spoiled, this is your warning. Spoilers. But this movie opens with kind of an obituary for Ellen Tapper Lay, who is the mother of Annie, the grandmother of the kids, who died at 78. And when I'm watching this, there's no way I read this when I watched this movie the first time. So often, because I'm not a fast reader, when text goes on screen, or if things are meant to be read, like there's also a scene in this movie where Toni Collette's character opens a book, and there's a passage literally highlighted for you to read to kind of explain this demon. A lot of times I don't even bother to read it because I know I'm not going to finish reading it before it cuts away. But through the ability of watching it at home and being able to pause it, I finally read it. And it talks about, it sets up who she is, but it also sets up the trauma that happened in her family that we hear more from Toni Collette's character while at a group therapy session. But crazy. The opening shot of the home office, kind of her studio space at the home, you see that she has these giant models that she's doing, these model houses. Also, first you see this tree house, which is a miniature house in a tree, and then you go inside to her studio, which are even more miniature houses, like a recreation of the actual house that they live in, scaled way down, like a dollhouse, basically. And this is kind of, as an artist, this is what she works on. And they are models of different moments that have happened in her life, or things in her life. And there's this great slow zoom in to a bedroom of this miniature house, and when it zooms all the way into the bedroom, it becomes the bedroom where her son Peter is being woken up because they're getting ready to go to the funeral of the woman that the obituary was shown at the beginning. You have the daughter who slept in the tree house, which is like a well-made tree house, but they're all concerned because it's cold and, she could have frozen. And there's clearly something, the daughter's a little weird. And that kind of fits into the whole idea of the story of this movie, the underlying premise of this movie. So they go to the funeral for the grandma, and it's crazy to see this, as my own mom passed away recently, but there was no funeral that I know of. The situation was what it was. I was down to my last few dollars. Like I didn't know how I was gonna pay rent, let alone organize some whole thing, and didn't really know her as well. Right? It's just something that, like, I don't know. It's like a crazy situation, and I don't know what I would have said. I didn't know my mom very well. Didn't know her life, so when I see this scene, that's what I'm thinking of as Toni Collette's character goes up to give like a eulogy and speak at her funeral. And I had no idea when she does start speaking how crazy what she says is, you know, because, I mean, just, it's always weird whenever I've seen depictions of things in movies, whether it's funerals or just family gatherings. Like, I didn't grow up with that. I didn't, like, my family kind of split apart in many ways, extended family, close family. I pretty much on my own. So when I see, like, families getting together and having fun, it's, like, so alien to me. But also, seeing this is kind of alien as well. And then Annie, Toni Collette's character, the daughter of this woman that died, starts to speak and mentions how she didn't know anything about her mother. She led a very private life. She had private friends. She doesn't feel qualified to be talking about her mom. And just then my head exploded, because I just wrote down in my notes that, like, putting myself in a situation like that, having gone through a similar situation where my mom did die, it, like, I wouldn't have known what to say. I didn't know her life. And that's exactly, so it kind of blew my mind, that opening thing that she says at the funeral. Let's take a quick break from this episode to talk about something that I want to share with you. The Many Faces, which is an ongoing ink painting series of abstract and surreal faces that I do. A new face comes out every day. However, the big news is available now. I have limited edition prints that are signed and numbered, printed by me, professional grade inks on the same quality paper, 140-pound paper that I use for the original paintings. So the prints in sizes of 4x6 are sold for $5, 6x9 are sold for $10, and 9x12 are sold for $20. Only 5 prints are available for each original ink painting. So start your art collection now by going to inspireddisorder.com. Take your walls to the next level with these limited edition prints. Once they're gone, they're gone. Go to inspireddisorder.com and shop the collection and take your walls to the next level. And now let's get back to this episode. During the funeral, you see somebody rubbing, like, some essential oils on the grandma's lips. The granddaughter sees her, sees that happening, and I kind of love Charlie, the granddaughter. She's, like, weird. She does this clicking thing, very, like, just a very weird kid. But I don't know. I love this kid watching this. Her sleeping in the tree house, making that clicking sound kind of when she's in the zone, kind of just doing her own thing. She gets sucked into her sketchbook drawing. She has a peanut allergy that's clearly going to come up later. Possibly was breastfed by the grandma, but it's one of many things where it's like, there's the miniature scene that Annie made showing the grandma coming in with, like, her breast out as Annie is breastfeeding, I assume to be Charlie. And then later on, there's a picture of the grandma feeding Charlie with a bottle. And when it's said, there's this moment where I forget if it's Charlie or the mom said that she used to feed me. They didn't specify what that meant when she was a child. But then you see the scene of Annie, and then that made me think, kind of recontextualize these moments that Annie is making in model form, that maybe those are moments of how she interpreted the moments and aren't actually literal. Like, maybe the grandma did just bottle feed her and not breastfeed her. Regardless, sets up that there's a weird issue with this family. And even Charlie, her actual room is at the top of the house, right? So you have the vaulted ceilings. So in many ways, it's almost like a larger version of the treehouse. Also high up, off the ground. So it would kind of make sense that Charlie's almost living in the miniature version of her own room when she goes into the treehouse to sleep. And the scene where she's forced to go with her brother to the party just is horrible for everybody involved. Like, clearly Charlie has no desire to be at this party. Obviously, Pete doesn't want her to be there either. And then even the party is like at this nice house, like looks expensive, like large artwork on the walls. And he ditches her to smoke with this girl he has a crush on, and told to just go stand by the cake in the kitchen to get a slice, right? Despite her not knowing anybody, despite nobody knowing who she is. And of course, the chocolate cake has peanuts in it. I would assume like a Reese's Cup kind of inspired chocolate cake. Of course, that peanut allergy was going to come up. And then you have the moment on the way home. Well, on the way to the party, before they even got there, they passed by a telephone pole that the camera sticks on that has a symbol, which is the same symbol you saw on the necklace of the grandma at the funeral. I think Annie has a necklace, similar necklace. She mentions it, but I didn't notice her wearing it. But it's a symbol that comes up later on, and that pole comes up later on as well. You have the mom, Annie, who's an artist, working on this exhibition of her miniatures, like the model house in the opening shot. As a kid, always had I personally, as a kid, always had jobs during the summertime, right? Growing up, whether it was sanding down and painting my grandparents' fence, or helping a neighbor take up all the tile off of the ground, helping them remodel a house. Or one summer I had a job when I was a kid. I mean, I was like, preteen probably. I had a job building miniature furniture for dollhouses for my grandma. Apparently my grandma, like, it's something I don't really think about, but apparently my grandma she did have these dollhouses. And so one summer she paid me to build all of this furniture for the dollhouse. So I had a giant, like, round glass patio table brought into my room so I could, work on all these things. And I remember staying up so late in my room that it did not have proper ventilation while I'm putting together this model furniture with model glue that has strong fumes. So I was probably high off of my ass as a child building all of this furniture. I remember staying up so late watching like the Arsenio Hall show, watching the Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Like, some of the first times I stayed up that late to watch those late night talk shows. But anyway, Annie lies about going to see movies in order to go to this group therapy for those who have lost loved ones. Like, she doesn't feel comfortable telling her husband that she's going to therapy for losing her mom, right? So she lies about going to the movies. And while she's at this group therapy, you find out her entire family had severe mental illness, which is also referred to in the opening obituary post at the beginning of the movie. And you see her dealing with pressure. She's getting pressure from the gallery. They want her to show them where she is, her progress on her work. She even has a model of the gallery space with miniatures of the miniatures in it. So, again, that Synecdoche, New York vibe from Charlie Kaufman. Great movie. But these models are very interesting, right? They're these, like, realized kind of moments in her life and aspects that are brought down into miniature, and even within those, there are miniatures within that. And she stops going to the group meetings after her daughter dies, after the tragedy, right? Which that pole later, Charlie's head gets lopped off in just a brutal scene. but Annie stops going to these group meetings. But then one of the members reaches out to her, but not at all thinking about like how her son might need help. Like he was driving the car when avoiding something in the road, swerving, accidentally killed his sister, and at no point does she care or think that maybe my son might need some help. She's lying about going to get help for herself, but at no point does she care about. So there's like this severe narcissism involved with this woman as well. But you see her, she sleeps in the treehouse one night. She goes to see that woman from the group, and she has medication, but all she can think about is how her son is so isolated. All I can think about is how her son is just so isolated and on his own. And meanwhile, she's reaching out for help. She's on medication. She's going to therapy. She's getting all of these means of help for her to cope with it. Meanwhile, her son is just being ignored, right? He's not in any support groups. Nobody's reaching out to see if he's okay. Nobody is putting him on antidepressant medication or anything, right? He's just dealing with nothing but blame and guilt for what he's done, which is like, to see this movie from his perspective is absolutely brutal. And then you have when her friend asks her how her son is doing after the tragedy, she ends up, instead of answering this, she tells her story about how she sleepwalks, and once she woke up once standing in his bedroom covered in paint thinner, them both covered in paint thinner. Right? So it's like she gets the question of how your son is handling the fact that he accidentally killed his sister, and you decide to tell a story about how you almost killed yourself and him by lighting each other on fire while he was sleeping. Right? It really feels like she's guiding it back to how she is the victim. Like, you asked about how my son is. Well, let me tell you about how I'm the victim and how I almost did this crazy thing. Right? And he always held it against her. This is what, that's like her. Like, he always held that. Like, you almost set him on fire, and you're upset with the fact that he holds that against you. I would assume you never like had any discussions about it, right? Like, the fact that he holds it against you is probably a sign that you've never really gone through that. You just went to therapy on your own. And again, just showing how she's the victim. He holds it against me. Why would he hold it against me? I was only going to light him on fire. And then you have her making the model of the tragedy with like the decapitated head on the side of the road, and another representation of her trauma, but also possibly through her biased perspective, right? We already know when she was asked the question about how her son's doing, how it always leads back to her. So it's like, and then also the inconsistencies with the fact that she has this miniature of her mom going to breastfeed Charlie, but then we saw a picture of her bottle feeding Charlie. So it's like there's inconsistencies of it. So it could just be her own biased view of these moments that happen. And then the husband goes in and sees this model and asks how Peter might feel. And she just justifies it as it's a neutral view of the accident. It's not like it's a neutral view of one of the most horrific things he accidentally did. He accidentally killed his sister, getting no support from anybody. And not only that, you're building a miniature to represent his grievous mistake. You spend time and effort to recreate his worst mistake in vivid detail instead of trying to find him help. Just so detached from reality and other people's feelings. And then you have her blow up at Peter at the dinner table, right? Again, no sympathy for his situation, only her perspective, only wishing the tragedy would make things easier. I after this, I hope it just make things easier for us. And you had the dad clearly angry at her response in that moment, and then her blaming him for not taking responsibility, despite the fact that Charlie was only there with Peter because she forced Peter to take her to the party. She didn't want to go to the party. Peter didn't want her to go to the party. She just wanted her there to keep Peter from having fun as a kid. So instead of her taking responsibility for the fact that she forced her daughter to go to this party that nobody involved wanted to happen, she blames that on Peter. It's just ridiculous. Also, you have these nightmares. She wakes up. It's like so many times people wake up and crazy things are happening and you find out that they're in a dream, and sometimes there's layers of dreams. One of those moments when she wakes up and she sees ants in a room, right? You see ants. She ends up going to Peter's room and ants are like spewing out of his mouth, right? Similar visually to when we saw Charlie's head severed on the side of the road, ants crawling all over it, right? So a similar view, callback to that imagery. And she seemingly wakes up from that dream, standing in Peter's room, as if she was sleepwalking again. And then she starts telling Peter that she didn't want him. She tried to have miscarriages. She did everything they told her not to do, right? And he still was born, right? She's just like laying it on this kid who's already receiving zero help or sympathy for accidentally killing his sister. Now he's hearing from his mom that she didn't want him, and she was literally trying to do everything to terminate the pregnancy. Aside from just getting an abortion, it just... But while she's telling him this stuff, next you see that she's covered in something, I assume paint thinner, and then this fire starts, and then she wakes up again. So, like, that didn't actually happen. But in her dreams, she was telling these things to Peter, seemingly things that, he asked her in her dream, like, why do you hate me? And she's like, I tried to kill you. I didn't want you. I tried to kill you when I was pregnant. I did everything I could to terminate the pregnancy, and I couldn't. It wouldn't work. You still got here. But I love you. I swear I do. Right? And then she has these, first off, she learns how to do a seance from this lady that, from her group, right? So she tries to do this manic seance herself, right? Bringing the husband down, bringing Peter down. Her so focused on trying to connect with Charlie instead of giving a fuck about the two people that are still alive, who are still hurting, and she's still focused on Charlie, and seemingly gets possessed by Charlie. It's a crazy scene, or at least it seems like she was possessed by Charlie. And then there's a scene where she tries to burn Charlie's sketchbook, and then her own sleeve catches on fire, almost like the spirit is protecting the sketchbook. Then you have the seance friend, Joan, when she goes to her house and she's not home. But then you see inside Joan's house, and you see on her kitchen table that there's like clearly ritual, candles lit everywhere. And there's clearly like some ritual going on with this. She's got like a triangle carved in the table, a picture of Pete. And then you have all of the decapitated heads that Charlie collected, along with this weird toy that she was making. Right? So clearly some kind of seance or some kind of thing going on. Let's take a quick break from this podcast episode so I can share something that can make you some money if that's what you're looking to do. Sign up now to make extra money doing user-generated content. You don't need to have a big social media following. You would like to get some free products to create original content like product photos, how-to videos, unboxing videos, product reviews, product demos. If you want to do any of that stuff, if that sounds like fun, you want to make some money and get some free products, go sign up through Join Brands today. Go to my link, inspireddisorder.com/UGC. This is the exact same service that I use to book jobs and get paid. It doesn't cost anything to sign up. You don't have to connect your social media accounts. Just prove you can make the content by completing their very simple certification process, and you're ready to make money. Sign up now. Go to inspireddisorder.com/UGC and click on the sign up button on the bottom of the page. Once you sign up, just apply to whatever gigs you want in the marketplace. Go to inspireddisorder.com/UGC and see all of the content I've created and click on the link to sign up and start getting paid to make content and get free products. Now let's get back to the show. Then her going up in the attic, digging through her mom's stuff, finds a book. Like, of course, I know it's a movie, but it's like she's opening boxes up, taking out seemingly random books, opening it to seemingly random pages, and just so happens that the exact page she turns to has a highlighted chapter, which when you pause the movie, unless you're fast enough to read, kind of describes this demon Payman and how the process by which you can bring him back and get him to possess a person permanently or whatever, right? Right? It's this passage highlighted discussing finding a host for the god of mischief Payman, right? You need a vulnerable male for this to work, right? Then she finds this picture of Joan, this woman, and her mom, and puts it together that, oh, Joan and her mom were part of this this cult or whatever, clearly working together to use Peter as the host, right? There's been discussion that, like, Charlie mentioned before she died, that she knew that they wanted a boy, right? I don't know if Grandma wanted a boy because they wanted a vulnerable male to transfer Payman's body that can, hold up shop permanently in this male host. And that's what they wanted Charlie for, but Charlie came out a girl and they were disappointed. Then you have Peter, right? This directionless kid, right? Just literally there's a scene, this great scene early on of his bedroom, and it's like camera starts on his computer screen. In front of the computer screen, you have a book that has ground up weed on it. You have his little bong. But then on the computer screen is a website or search results for popular career interests. And then on top of that window was a social media account for this girl that he has a crush on, right? In that one image, you know everything about Peter, right? He has no idea what career he wants to get into. He has just popular career interests website up, but he keeps getting distracted by this girl that he's got a crush on. And meanwhile, the only way he's able to get any kind of medication or therapy is by smoking weed. Like, he's self-medicating with weed. And this is even before his sister dies, but it's clear that, like, his mom doesn't give a shit about him, didn't want him. And doesn't seem to really care about him once his sister does die. But he packs a bowl, right, in this tiny bomb, smokes it out the window. Kind of a perfect visual description of this kid, this high school teenager, in a single image. And then after the tragedy, clearly a zombie, right? He's like, from the moment he realizes, after swerving to miss whatever was in the road, and he hears the noise of his sister being decapitated, and just frozen in the car, trying to just get out the words, "Are you okay? Is everything okay?" Just like hoping that he will hear a response that she is, but like knowing full well that the worst thing just happened, and just how he is, from then on, he's like this catatonic zombie, right? Trying to self-medicate with weed, right? the complete opposite end of the spectrum from how his mom is handling this whole thing. You know, she goes and seeks help. She went to these group therapy meetings, right? She's taking medication. She's doing all of the things that she knows somebody would need help with after a loss, but he is not receiving any of those things, just trying to survive on his own, right? Just absolutely alone after that. The scene where he has a panic attack after taking a hit, right? And just like begging one of his friends. They don't care either, right? They're just hanging out smoking weed, and this guy is just trying to survive medicating with weed, and he's having this panic attack. He's just begging his friend, please hold my hand. Please. It's like such a sad scene. Him not sleeping. You see him just laying in bed with his eyes wide open. Him seeing Charlie in the shadows. One of many times people are seen in shadows. Like Annie sees her mom in the shadows at one point early on. But this kid not getting any support at all. And then he starts seeing this light refraction, right, that kind of guides his view to look at things. And he sees his reflection while he's at school in the glass cabinet that's next to him. And his reflection is of him just having this like creepy smile looking back at him, right? While the reality of him is that he's basically catatonic. And he's got this like creepy smile reflection looking back at him. It's crazy. Then he sees Charlie in the shadows of his room, followed by these arms trying to rip his head off. Then getting possessed by Charlie in class, right? This creepy moment where he like starts to do the clicking sound, kind of raising his hand with this like, you know, weird gesture, right? And then seemingly choking like she was because of the allergy, right? Then slamming his head into the desk multiple times before screaming. Just like this guy's reality is just hell. It's just hell, right? Not only are bad things happening to you, but like he's surrounded by people that don't care. And like maybe his dad cares, but his dad's not taking him to therapy. His dad's not taking him to get medication. He's like concerned more than the mom is, but the mom is had never wanted him, and now he killed Charlie, so now he's like he's like doesn't even exist to her. And then just after that, his mom's friend just after that, his mom finds in a headless body in the attic. Like she's going up, she sees this headless body in the attic, which is apparently the mom, the grandma, and they cut the head off. And there's the same symbol that painted on the roof that was on the pole that decapitated Charlie. It was on their necklaces, and apparently is the symbol of payment. So that's painted on the wall above the grandma. And was in the cover of the book with the information on it. You also have Annie's friend from the group therapy who insists on talking to her when Annie's kind of hesitant about coming back to therapy after her daughter dies. Then invites her over for a seance, and kind of a medium came over and taught her this whole razzle-dazzle thing. So she ends up doing the seance for Annie, right, which that entailed that she does with her husband and Peter. Shows her the rules to communicate with her daughter. And she's like, the entire family needs to be present. She ends the whole thing telling her that she didn't kill her, and she isn't gone, right? So she's like still around. And on the way home, Annie hears the tongue click, right? So it's like this person tells Annie how she can communicate with Charlie, but we find out that this spirit is Payman, was in the body of Charlie, but couldn't stay there permanently because it wasn't a vulnerable male, right? And the idea is now to transfer that soul that is kind of without a body now that Charlie is dead into Peter. And it's kind of this like almost like a long con trying to get Annie to fulfill these things that the grandma wanted to do, which is the overarching like structure of this movie is this cult that the grandma was part of is trying to get the permanent host for payment. And Peter is the host that they want. And probably the reason why she was unable to kill him, because the grandma probably helped keep that from happening. There's a lot of scary moments in this. There's the moment she reads a note from her mom just after the funeral. She turns the light off in the studio, and in the shadows, another one of those moments, in the shadows, she sees her mom. Very scary. And she kind of stares at her for a beat before turning the lights on. And it's almost as if she had, like, the mom had a smile on her face. The grandma. Which you see other people, like, later on in the movie, you see a lot of naked people in the shadows, and they all have, like, a big smile on their face. And I'm sure part of that is because they know that soon Payman will have its permanent host. So she turns the lights on. She looks over at her miniatures, the one that shows the mom going to breastfeed Charlie, and she turns it to the wall, like she doesn't want to see it. But that's when we see the scene of the breastfeeding, the grandma wanting to breastfeed Charlie, and and Annie breastfeeding her in bed. Which at the moment recontextualizes the scene where Charlie mentions that the grandma would feed her, but in that moment it's kind of ambiguous whether she meant bottle feed or breastfeed, and Annie's model would imply breastfeeding, but then we see the picture later that she's bottle feeding her, so it's like, there's ambiguity to that whole thing. Regardless, it's a creepy family dynamic. Charlie in school, distracted. She's like building this toy instead of taking a test. And this bird flies into the window, which is a scary moment, another jump scare. But then it's followed by her. This refraction of light guides her eyes to scissors that are on the teacher's desk. And later you see Charlie using those scissors to cut the head off the dead bird, right? So it's just one of the many times where you have like this scary moment, like a jump scare, followed by this creepy what's going on right now? Why is she cutting the head off this bird? There's also this voyeur kind of aspect to it. We're outside the school, waving at the person waving at Charlie after she's beheaded that bird. Also outside the home after Peter blows the weed smoke out the window and kind of takes a breath. So there's like these voyeuristic moments of people watching them, and there's moments where Peter's at school and he's like hearing his name and sees people. The anaphylactic shock is a scary moment. The decapitation, absolutely brutal. The fact she can't breathe. Right, she's got her head sticking out the window to try and get air, and he swerves to avoid something in the road, and just bam! It just absolutely brutal. You have this wide shot of this safety-friendly Subaru stopping on the side of the road, and just like him realizing it, knowing, but going through the motions, asking if she's okay. Then just like slowly letting off the brake to let the car go again. And then you see him slowly pulling up to the house. And it's so early in the movie and so brutal. Then the zombie walk he takes into the house and then into his bed. Then cut to the morning where his eyes are still wide open, right, with his head on the pillow. And you just hear Annie realize, like, the next morning he's laying in bed, eyes still open, didn't get any sleep. But he can now hear his mom realizing what happened and wailing in the distance. and then cut to that decapitated head with the ants. It's just like that scene at the beginning of the movie that's kind of starts everything off is like so brutal. Then you have when Peter wakes up after slamming his head into the desk, discovered his dad after his dad had been burnt up, discovering his dad's corpse, and you have the mom in the background. Like he's looking down at his charbroiled dad, and behind him you see up in the ceiling, up in the rafters, you see his mom, which is absolutely crazy. Then there's this creepy guy from the funeral is naked in the shadows, and you see his mom chasing him. Absolutely scary. Him jumping out the window, and then you see her body float, or he goes up into the attic, right? And you see her on the underside of the attic door just banging her head on the attic. It's just like absolutely terrifying moment. Super scary. And then he sees his mom floating in the attic above him, sawing off her head with a wire. Then you have a ton of naked people there scare him. He ends up jumping out the window, and then he sees his mom's beheaded body float up into the treehouse. It is just like that final sequence, absolutely terrifying. The dad, pretty ineffective in this movie overall. Really kind of cares only about upcoming events, keeping everybody on track. Her gallery showing, his son's SAT preparation, kind of detached from everything. And not like being horrible to his son, but also not helping the son get help. And him ending up getting burned when Annie throws a sketchbook. Don't really know why he got burned, because she tried to burn the sketchbook before, and instead she caught on fire. But now she threw it in the fire, and he got burned. So I don't understand that. But the end of it, when Payman was first in Charlie's body, but couldn't fully possess her because Payman needs a male body. So they transferred it to Peter. And this is the only aspect of the movie that I wish I had been communicated better. The what's going on, the Payman thing, because it ties everything together. It makes everything make sense. Like this god Payman makes the clicking sound. This god Payman makes these toys and does these things, decapitates. Like all of the things Charlie was doing are things that Payman does. And you see that when that happens and gets transferred into Peter, he does like the same clicking sound. Which there is some of that explanation in the movie, but I think it could have been done a little bit more. Obviously, there's a line. You don't want to be too much over-explaining. But, this demonic possession mixed with mental illness, I thought was great as a whole for this movie. But a great movie. Great movie. Disturbing. Scary. Does everything. And once I looked up the whole Payman thing and kind of had the ending explained, it made complete sense. And I liked it a lot more. I thought it completed the movie perfectly. But I want to thank everybody for tuning in to this episode of The Ray Taylor Show. I hope you enjoyed my thoughts on Hereditary. Don't forget to tune in on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for more movie and TV show reviews. And join the conversation by leaving a comment or rating on your favorite podcast platform or over on youtube.com/inspired disorder. Next week, I will be talking about Midsommar. But until next time, enjoy the show. Subscribe to The Ray Taylor Show on YouTube and everywhere podcasts are found. Binge the full week ad-free over at inspireddisorder.com/plus. Purchase Ray Taylor Show merch over at inspireddisorder.com. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Peace out!
Today is the day where you wake up and you realize that everything that you've been dreaming about, everything that you've been wanting, every goal and wish and hope that you've ever had can become real. Dreams can come true. What you manifest in your mind, you can bring to reality.